Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Mr. Productivity Podcast. I'm Mr. Productivity, and we got a great guest lined up for you today. I say great guest because I'm already setting the expectations for my guest. Hopefully he's not sweating bullets over there yet, but we'll get to him in just a second. Don't forget to head on over to my website, MrProductivity.com, M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. There you will get free training from me. You can't beat free. But I want to get right to my guest today, Chris Boettcher. Now, let me tell you about this young man known as Chris Boettcher. He is in the health and wellness. And if you've been listening to my show for one episode or all 1,280 plus episodes, I've been telling you healthy people are productive people. Check this guy out, Chris Boettcher. He is a doctor. He wants to help us lose 20 pounds. I need a little help with that. And kill the dad bod. And check this out. He has done not one, not two, not five, but 10 Ironmans. Chris, welcome to the show.
Mark, I'm excited to be here, brother. I appreciate the invite and really looking forward to the conversation here this afternoon.
Now, if you're not aware, listener or viewer, if you're watching this on X or YouTube, here's the secret about podcast hosts. We just have guests we really want to talk to about to get a free coaching session. We just publicize for the world. Just being full disclosure for you. Chris, listen, I'm sure you agree with me that healthy people get more things done than people who are unhealthy. Do you agree with me on that?
100%. I think there's a statistic out there that healthy people make on average like $250,000 more than unhealthy people do over the course of their life. So it may not be fair. We say it all the time. You get treated different, you feel more confident, and as a result, you're going to make more money and generally just live a more joyful, fulfilled life as a result of it.
And I want people to understand that we'll probably be talking about a whole foods diet on the show. A whole cookie is not whole foods. That's not what we're going to be talking about. It's a joke. It's probably a bad joke, but I'm a dad, and I make dad jokes. That's what that is. And you're a dad too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Father of three. I got 3 little ones under 7 right now, That's why I told you before we got started, I'm recording this outside of my home because the home is a bit of a war zone, not really conducive to podcast recording, that's for sure.
I think that's okay. Now, you don't look old enough to have 3 kids, but they're all under 7, you said?
Yeah, 6, 3, and our little one just turned 1 a couple months ago.
Wow. My daughters are 30 and 26, and they don't live at home anymore, so it's quiet at the house as long as Amazon doesn't deliver something and the dog goes crazy. But so you're a doctor. What are you a doctor in?
Yeah, doctor of physical therapy. Spent about 10 years working in traditional healthcare, and keep it short, but biggest thing was just that recognize the vast divide between really getting more of the reactive medicine that was going on, and even the patients that I was seeing, total knee replacement, total hip replacement, were in a position where nutrition wasn't a focus, medications were through the roof, and just needed a reset to be able to get on the front lines of health, as opposed to being in a position where I continued to feel handcuffed by the traditional system. And just recognizing a lot of the things and the hurdles that were in place that were not conducive to getting people healthy. And I don't necessarily even think that was the goal of the traditional healthcare system to begin with. But so that's me in a nutshell as far as the transition that's gone on here over the last few years.
I will tell you, if you are watching this on some platform, if you see me wiping my forehead, I was out getting some precious vitamin D from the sun while grounding, and I thought our interview started at 2 o'clock, and I need about a half an hour to cool down. So I'm still sweating, but it's a good sweat because I was outside in nature. And I know you and I have gone back and forth on X before. The power of grounding, also known as earthing, and getting vitamin D. I'm anti-big pharma. There is a place for it in the world, but I don't think it should be the first place we go. So let's start out from there. Why is it important not to go for the pill, but instead take care of ourselves, I guess you would call it holistically? In other words, you're eating better foods, you're exercising. Why is that more important than relying on a pill?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, this was, when the veil was pulled back for me, was when I just recognized that the majority of the things we're conditioned to believe about most things in life has to do with coming from some level of profit. So at the end of the day, the things that are the most healthy for us are not making anybody any money, and they're very difficult to monetize. And so being able to really distance ourselves from being a consumer in the system, because that's really what the healthcare system tries to create, is a consistent revolving door of consumers, and putting us into what I always call Netflix subscription model, where you sign up for it and you can never get away from it. You're hooked in, and at that point you become dependent on that system to be able to take care of your health. And so that's really why, in my opinion, I think over the last couple of years, if you're awake a bit, you recognize with what's happened over the last 2, 3, 4 years that ultimately the goal of most of these companies is not to get us healthy. It's to create as much revenue as possible from us and to extract that however they can. And it's a bit of a harsh reality to come to grips with, but that's really where we really try to focus our message, because you got to wake people up first before they actually take action. And if they don't recognize that there are people out there that don't necessarily have their best interests at heart, that are really just trying to, again, extract that monetary value from their life, sometimes we got to get a little bit ticked off once in a while to be able to take action. And so that reality is hard to come to grips with at first, but I think it's something that most of us really need to really step back and be honest with ourselves about the direction that we're trying to lead our health.
You said 2 words in your answer there, your health. And I think that's really important. People need to understand it's your health. It's your responsibility. I lost my father in April of 2023 suddenly, but I remember we had conversations before he passed away about all these medicines he was taking. And I would say to my dad, he was 83 at the time he passed away, I said, "Dad, why are you taking all these medications?" He goes, "Well, the doctor told me to." I said, No, Dad, no. It's your health, your body. You have a right to understand why you're taking these pills and ask the doctor. And my father's from that generation. You never question your doctor. You never ask questions. You don't need clarifications. And I wish he would have done that, because I didn't, to this day, I don't know why he's taking all these pills. And I think whether you're 20 or you're 90, before the doctor could say you should take this pill, you should say, "Why do I need this?" And make sure you understand what are you taking it for, and more important, I would think, is that are you going to have any negative consequences as a result of that medication?
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that we have to advocate for ourselves, and we can no longer be in a position where we're just taking our doctor's word for things. I think there are a lot of very strong healthcare professionals that really do care about people, but when you get under the hood of what's going on with healthcare right now, even if you have the best intentions for your patient, you're just so handcuffed by most of the education that is given is going to be that pill first approach, and it's going to be that reactive care treatment. So there's just not a lot of quality information being given by doctors. And again, it's not their fault. They're just a product of their environment. They're also just seeing way too many people. They're being asked to see 40, 50 people in a day. They're not going to have an hour-long conversation with you about nutrition, because they just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. So it's really on us to understand the medications we're taking, if we have to be taking them. Are they a necessity? Are there alternative options that we can be exploring? I'm a big fan of what I call the N of 1 approach, where there are so many things. You just talked about grounding and vitamin D and all these things that we can be doing day in and day out that are going to be so much more beneficial for our health, that have basically zero risk, that we can try, see how much better we feel. And you start compounding those things, and we don't need a randomized controlled trial to tell us to go get quality sunlight and drink more water and all these little things. We should just be doing these things and allowing them to build momentum in our life. And if we can start doing that slowly, one step at a time, you can literally change your life over the course of a few months.
Now, I don't remember, what part of the country are you in?
I'm in the Southeast.
Didn't appreciate what I'm about to say. Grounding is safe unless you put your feet in the fire ant mound. You have to be careful down in the South, because those things are not pleasant. We'll just leave it at that. But I want to talk to you about, you probably heard of Dr. Peter Attia's book, Outlive. He talks about medicine 2.0 versus medicine 3.0. And if you're not familiar with that, medicine 2.0 is exactly what Chris just talked about, reactive. Medicine 3.0 is, okay, let's get ahead of this stuff by taking better care of ourselves. So I am 58 years old. I'll be 59 June 21st of 2024. And I am determined to live to 110. Now, I can't get there on hope and a prayer. I have to take care of myself. So as we have communicated quite frequently on X, I run every day. I've been doing that since August 29, 2017. I'm always outside grounding a minimum of 15 to 20 minutes every day. Vitamin D when I can get it, and unfortunately here in Houston I get a lot. I take some supplements, but not just any supplements. I went to a functional nutritionist, someone who had a degree, to give me the right supplements, what I was missing in my geome or whatever it's called. I'm not that familiar with that kind of stuff. That's why I paid her. But I'm taking an active role in taking care of myself. I'm not going to Google and having Dr. Google help me. I'm going to train professionals. So talk to us a little bit about when we take care of ourselves, the simple steps that anyone can take, because I don't like excuses, Chris. I don't want anybody to say, I can't do that because I'm not Chris and not Mark. I want to give them tactical stuff that anybody can do as a result of you being on the show today.
Everything you just touched on there, as you said, you're taking responsibility. I think that's paramount to anything else, is understanding that we need to bear the burden of it's my health and nobody's going to do this for me, and recognizing that it's not insurmountable regardless of where you're starting. Whether you're starting at 500 pounds or you're in a position where you're 75 and you've got a lot of pain and you're dealing with some things, there's always opportunity to make small changes that lead to significant turnarounds. And we've seen that across the board with clients over the last few years of there's really nothing that is insurmountable if you're willing to step up and make small changes. And I think just being willing to step outside of where you are right now and try to take a step forward, that's the first piece of this, because we can talk about nutrition, we can talk about exercise, all these different things, but we need to be able to establish what I would call like self-belief again. And that means we have to take a step. We can't just be analyzing information and continuing to kick things down the road. Eventually, we just have to step up and try. So that's really number one, is just getting after it and picking one thing that you can do to stack that first brick. And then from there, you can build on it. But as far as more like tangible things that guys can apply immediately, I think being able to look at your day and really taking a look at what we call your overall protein intake is huge, but also the foods that you're taking in from like a protein to calorie ratio. And what I mean by that is most of the standard diet of the guys that I sit down with and I unpack what they're eating on a day-to-day basis, they're taking in 40, 50, 60, maybe 70 grams of protein in a day. And the reality is that is just not enough. You can work out 6 days a week, and if you're taking in 50 or 60 grams of protein, you're going to spin your wheels. You're going to get very frustrated. You're not going to be leaning down. You're likely going to be consuming a lot more what we call empty calories. Not necessarily things that are unhealthy for you, but they're not things that are helping you to get to your goals because you don't have enough protein on board. You're feeling always hungry. Blood sugar is always bouncing up and down. And so being able to look at each meal, the baseline thing we always start with guys is hit 30 grams of protein minimum. Every single meal, just put that on autopilot as much as you can. And I'll go back to the autopilot here again, is identifying, you talked about your whole podcast is about productivity here. There's nothing that is more unproductive than having to make 21 decisions on meals throughout the week. So
100%.
You've got to take away some of that decision fatigue that goes on with, what am I going to have tomorrow morning for breakfast? And if you're having to make those decisions, you're likely, with everything else going on in your life, going to take the path of least resistance. So it's going to be some kind of an egg sandwich that you grab at Starbucks on the drive-thru, or it's going to be some kind of fast food. Putting a couple of meals a day on autopilot, where you have 2 options for breakfast. You pick one or the other. You have 2 options for lunch. You pick one or the other. You have a couple of things you can fill in the gaps with from time to time. But knowing that these meals are winning meals that you can go back to over and over again. And the beautiful thing about it is once you start to feel better, your body actually demands that stuff as opposed to some of the garbage you were putting in yourself before. So you get this like clear distinction between this is what I was feeling with before, and when I eat it, I feel like trash. And now I'm feeling myself with these couple of options with breakfast and lunch, and I feel great. I'm not having energy crashes at 3 o'clock. I'm not going home and raiding the pantry when I get home from work because I'm looking for something to pick me back up. And you just feel better throughout the day. Those would be probably the 2 biggest things on the nutrition side of things, hitting the protein intake and putting a couple things on autopilot with breakfast and lunch. And that ultimately gives you more margin when you get to dinner time, because those are the more unscheduled social events, kids events, things like that are always coming up. So we don't have to be perfect with dinner if we're consistently dialing it in. And let's say you just binge on a Friday night and you go off and do something crazy. If you know the next morning you have something to be able to get back to, it's a bit of a reset, and you prevent yourself from spiraling there. And I could sit here and talk a whole bunch about exercise, but the reality is 80% of the progress that guys are going to make are going to be related to nutrition. You just can't work it. We spend so much time and energy talking about the nutrition component because of how important it is. And then it's a matter of, okay, I've only got 2 or 3 days a week where I can commit, maybe it's 30 minutes to exercise. You would be surprised how much progress you can make when nutrition is where it belongs and you're in a really good position with those 2 or 3 workouts a week. And you can just maintain consistency over perfection with all of those things.
I wrote notes when Chris is talking. I'm writing notes because I don't like to interrupt my guests. So I got some things I want to talk to you about. My current breakfast regimen is 2 muscle milks, which is 50 grams of protein. That's the first thing I do within minutes of waking up. It gives me a big hit of protein. Then I do my morning routine. Now, I want to ask you this about lunch and dinner. So I work from home. My wife and I work on our business. And what I decided to do, and what works best for me, I cut my food off by 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm in bed by 8:30. So I like to have a 12-hour fasting window. I flip dinner and lunch. So I have my heavier meal at lunch and my lighter meal at dinner. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think from like a lifestyle approach, that can work really well, especially with the way that you just talked about things, where if you're going to bed early enough, for some people, they are staying up till 10, 11 at night. And so if you're eating your meal at 5 and it's a smaller meal, what tends to happen there is you end up getting to 8:30, 9 o'clock, and you're starting to feel hungry again. You get 3-4 hours after a meal, and that's where it can get a little bit tricky. Now, I will say that I think in general, having an eating window is really important. I actually prefer calling it an eating window as opposed to like intermittent fasting, because intermittent fasting isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. And in a lot of cases, it's actually hurting you because you get yourself in a position where maybe you're doing a morning workout, but you're not eating until noon. That's not really serving you very well there. That's putting you in a position where your body has an opportunity right after that workout to be able to really take in some quality protein, get some calories in, get into recovery right away after that workout. But instead, you're really starving yourself away from that opportunity to even stabilize blood sugar, because your muscles are naturally going to sponge up blood sugar more effectively after a workout than they would 6 or 8 hours later. That's where we like to look at guys' individual lifestyles. And for you, that sounds like a really great way to set your day up for success. You know you can cut yourself off by 5:30. It serves you well to get up and immediately eat something right away. For some people, they don't really feel hungry in the morning and they're not working out. So in that case, yeah, maybe you don't need to be ingesting calories immediately upon waking to, again, get your digestive system going right away. That may be unnecessary, but it really needs to be on an individual level, and ultimately trying to avoid all of those excessive quote unquote snacks or mini meals where you're eating 5, 6, 7 times a day. That's not helping you. There's a few time and a place where people need those additional calories and feedings, but it's few and far between. Most of us would be better eating a whole lot less frequently and just really maximizing the intake that's going on with those meals.
Very well said. And I want to talk to you about moving, because my wife constantly reminds me you can't outrun a bad diet. And I'm a daily runner. I run every day, at least 1 mile, usually 2. And the thing is about moving is, I read a book called Built to Move, I don't know, by Kelly and Juliet Starrett. I don't know if you've heard of this book. And they say in the book, and I'd love to know your take on this, they said a lot of people exercise once a day, but that's not what they're recommending anymore. They're recommending, yeah, you should exercise, maybe weightlifting, go for a swim, bike ride, run, whatever. But then you should be doing active stuff throughout the day. So what I'll do, I may go for a 15-minute walk after lunch or dinner. My wife bought me a rebounder, which is right behind our couch, so I can watch TV while I'm rebounding. So do you agree with that exercise shouldn't be just a box we check off and we're done for the rest of the day? We should move throughout the day?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, if you think about kind of how we got to where we are from the standpoint of like our ancestors, like we were not sitting for 10 or 12 hours at a time. So our body, that's a very recent development over the last few decades, where even 100 years ago, we were spending so much time outside moving and looking after the land and building and doing all kinds of things that were pretty vigorous labor, to be honest. But now all of a sudden we're in this position where we've had to like basically create exercise as a thing, when that was really more of a lifestyle. lifestyle. So I agree with you 100%. I would say even something as simple as walking. Sometimes there's people who go out and they walk for an hour every morning and they get 6, 7, 8,000 steps, and that's great. But then they sit all day long. I would argue you're better off getting those 8,000 steps in and you're getting up every hour, moving for 10 or 15 minutes. You know, for me personally, I take a lot of small walks. We set up a little garden a couple years ago, so I love it this time of year because I can go out and maybe I'm just literally going outside and I'm picking a few weeds out of a garden for 5 or 10 minutes when I want to get away from the computer. But I'm moving, I'm getting some fresh air. Like, those are little things that I think we all need in our life, where it's not stuck in a cubicle sitting for hour after hour. We need to be getting up and training our body how to move more consistently. And you touched on moving after meals. I think if you're looking for kind of that low lever movement throughout the day, like a 5-minute walk after meals has been shown to, you can get like a 30% drop in your overall blood sugar spike after a meal just by moving for a few minutes. Instead of getting at 12, you have a big meal, you sit down at your desk and start working, you're probably going to get that blood sugar spike quite a bit higher, which means you're going to get a bigger insulin push. You're likely going to also then get a bigger crash that goes on as a result of that a couple hours later. You could even avoid some of those energy crashes just by moving for a few minutes after your meals to keep that blood sugar stable. And realistically, from a metabolic health standpoint, there's nothing more powerful than keeping our blood sugar in kind of a narrower range throughout the day and just being able to avoid those extreme highs and those extreme lows they're going to make us feel terrible, but they're also going to be very inflammatory for us as well.
I said earlier that I can't stand people making excuses. So we had a freak winter storm in February of 2021. 3 days in a row, it was 15 degrees Fahrenheit in Houston. I didn't go out for my run. But you know what I did, Chris? I ran in my house. Confused the dog because I would run. We have a long hallway. I'd run from my master bedroom, down the hallway, through the library, around the couch, back. So I did it. And then Wednesday that week, we had no power. I was running at 5 o'clock in the morning and I used the flashlight. Now, you may think I'm crazy, but if I don't run first thing in the morning, my whole day feels off. So if it's thundering and lightning at first light, that's when I go running. I can't start the day. I feel really lethargic if I don't start my day with a run. I guess it purges cortisol and stuff like that. Tell us why it's so important for our bodies and, of course, our productivity to exercise first thing in the morning instead of after work.
Yeah, and I think it is a little bit different for each individual. On the exercise side, I think I told you this the last time we chatted, that I'm the exact opposite of you, Mark. I hate working out in the first thing in the morning. Now, I do it a couple days a week. I'm much more the guy that I work out in my garage a lot at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. It's just how I'm wired in that way.
Doesn't affect your sleep?
No, it doesn't affect my sleep. I can usually sleep pretty well, but I do know that's a thing for a lot of people. So it just depends on the individual. But I will say, going back to what you said earlier, and why you feel better, I think a lot of it has to do with just helping regulate our circadian rhythms. I talked about this earlier about how our ancestors got up when the sun came up. They went to bed when the sun went down. You get up, you get that sunlight in your face, and even the wavelengths of the sun, this is going to get a little hippie out there, but just bear with me here for a minute, is basically there's different wavelengths in the sun's rays in the morning and in the evening. And instead of them being more inflammatory, which is what we think about when it's like the middle of the day, getting sunburn, it's actually the exact opposite in the morning, where it's helping our brain and our body to decrease some inflammation. And it's telling our body it's time to wake up. So it helps, as you said, stabilize cortisol levels, just puts us in a position where we're ready to get going with our day. So I would say it could be a run, it could be a workout, but for me, it's just walking. Like, just getting out for a walk before 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning is really helpful to just jumpstart the day. I'd say it's better than any cup of coffee, to be honest. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to come home from my walk and I'm going to have my cup of coffee, but I find that's just really helpful. And even taking it a step further with kids, you get kids out in the morning in the sun, they're going to generally be in a little better mood. And especially at night, it has the exact opposite effect at night, where it helps wind us down. Sun's going down. It's telling us, okay, it's time for us to decompress. It's getting ready for bed. So it's a great way to prep your body for more of that rest and digest state, is just being outside in those evening hours as the sun's going down.
For many years, I heard about the power of the cold shower or the cold plunge, and I resisted it for years. And then Somebody, I believe is Gary Brecka, said if you've never done a cold shower, what you do is you go take your normal shower and then a nice warm shower. We all like that warm, comfortable, hot shower. And then you make it cold and stand in there for 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I was doing that, and I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go cold shower from start to finish. Now, again, if you're watching this video, you can tell I shave my head every day. I'm bald. So it doesn't take that long to actually take a cold shower. But when I get out of the cold shower, I feel so energized. And it's something about the cold water. Now, yes, we have warmer cold water down here in Houston than y'all got up in North America. But that cold shower just wakes me up. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I go back and forth on them. It's certainly become a big thing. The cold plunges, the ice baths, the cold showers. I think in general, they can be helpful for some people that they really enjoy them. I guess my big issue, especially more on the cold plunge side of it, is it's something that we think about it similar to if you have an injury, icing your injury, it's going to cause that decreased inflammation, but it's also creating a lot of stress. So a lot of times the energy wave that you get from being in an ice bath, being in a cold shower is really like the survival instinct of like, man, I'm like charged up, because you get a bit of an adrenaline surge from it. And so that's why I'm not a big fan of doing like a daily ice bath. Saunas, on the other hand, in my opinion, is something you could do every day versus an ice bath. I like doing it on more of like recovery days where, you know, for instance, like when you do a workout, okay, and you're going to have some, let's just say you're going for a run or you're doing a lift, you're causing some micro damage to the muscle, which is actually a positive thing if it's not an if it's not an overwhelming amount of stress. You want some level of stress that creates a little bit of micro trauma so your body can then repair from it. When we jump in an ice bath right after a workout, what it's doing is it's decreasing the blood flow, decreasing our body's ability to get quality nutrition into that area and also get rid of some of those toxins. So we need inflammation in a way right after a workout to help recover. And so if we're going to do ice baths, in my opinion, maybe doing them once or twice a week and doing it on more of those recovery days where it's been 24 hours, it's been 36 hours or so since your workout, where then your body's been able to get a lot of that nutritional value into that area to recover and rebuild. And then you do the ice bath. That to me is the happy medium in between versus doing them every day where you potentially are just causing a lot of extra stress on a system that could already have a lot of stress on it. It's a little bit of a different approach and mindset with the ice baths. The cold showers, I just hate, to be honest with you. I try them. If I'm going to do them, I'm going to stand in there for 2 minutes and I'm like, this is not comfortable. Like I'm getting out of here. I'm not necessarily the best guy as far as the cold shower side of things, but yeah, to each his own. And I would say I have less of an issue with cold showers if you feel like it gets you going with the day versus those intense ice baths where the entire body is submerged and you're putting yourself into basically a very stressful, shocking environment.
Yeah, Tony Robbins is big on that. He's got a big cryo tank outside his house, so he goes out and jumps in it first thing. That has no appeal to me at all. But I want to ask you about this. I don't know if you know the answer to this question. By the way, folks, he has no clue. So Chris, be fully honest to say, hey, I don't know the answer. Can we go to the next question? Because that's how I roll in this. I'm a big fan of European football, and I love Manchester United. And I saw their special on Netflix about their treble-winning season last year. In one of the episodes, the guys were getting in a cryo tank. Now, these are top athletes. These are not like you and me. They're top athletes. What is the benefit of an athlete going to a cryo tank? I don't even know how long. It wasn't that long they were in there. Maybe less than a minute. I don't know. But that extreme cold for these high-performance athletes, what is the advantage for them?
Yeah, so you mentioned something. You talked about the high-level athletes, and we have to take into account that their ability to recover is on a different level than somebody who's 40, 50, 60 years old that is just trying to get healthy or try to maintain. So I think understanding that for them, they're also working at such a high level. You think the demands on their body with training and some of these games, it is going to cause a significantly higher level of inflammation, and because of the stress that they're putting themselves under, the intensity level that they're working. So in that case, you think about them being able to control inflammation is a much bigger issue, and they need to be able to do it very quickly, because in some cases they've got games 48 hours later that they've got to play all over again. It's understanding that their bodies can handle it, and that inflammation and keeping that under control is so important. And I think that's why there's so much of that stuff out there, from whether it's the guys like Cristiano Ronaldo, and you see how much, I think I saw something yesterday, he spends like $1 million a year just on his recovery, like his recovery tools at his house and his team. It's like $1 million that he spends just to recover. And so, yeah, like for them, their body is literally that's what they use to be able to pay the bills and to continue to do what they need to do. In some cases, it's hard to relate because of what they have. Their genetics are on a different level, first of all, and they just have a team and specialists that are literally there to take care of their bodies, and it's not necessarily something that's practical for 99.9% of us.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with productivity. I just want to ask that question out of curiosity. Now, you're really big on X, and you have a pinned post on your X profile talking about, this is an obesity epidemic in our country, and it is now all the way down to the kids. And one of the things you said, I thought this was very fascinating. If you want your kids to exercise more, you should exercise more, because your kids are going to watch what you do. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I get a lot of pushback on that, to be honest. You always get those outliers of, oh, my parents were sedentary and I'm running marathons all the time. And don't get me wrong, it's not a one-size-fits-all piece there. But the reality is, in our world today, there are so few examples of people who are moving. And it's not just parents, but you look at what's going on in schools, you look at what's going on with their peers. They're just not going to see that example of someone who's consistently. Exactly. So it comes down to, now, if they don't see it from us as parents, they are just not going to see it. And we cannot expect our kids to reinvent the wheel on something that they've never been exposed to. Them, all of that screen time and sedentary activity, that's normal behavior. That's their norm. And we get to look back, and I'm 36, almost 37 here. And I can see, and I remember going outside with my brothers, and my mom would say, you guys got to go out. I'll let you know when it's lunchtime. And we'd go out and we'd play for hours. And that was normal. We'd be riding our bikes around the neighborhood with kids. That's not happening now. So unless us as parents are willing to step up and take them hiking, play in the backyard, and we're physically able to do those things, our kids are just not going to do it. And we're going to continue to see healthcare providers and pharmaceutical companies telling us that, 50% of kids under 12 need to start taking things like Ozempic. And we're going to put them on those Netflix subscription models from when they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And they are literally going to be on those things the rest of their life. And that's something that gets me charged up, because I just can't believe that's the reality that we're going to raise the next generation in, is this idea that they've never been exposed to movement. They've never been exposed to what quality nutrition is. And instead, it's this dependency on, this is life, and I just have to take this medication, and I have no responsibility, and I also have no ability to be able to do this myself. So that's the part that really is, I think there's an evil side to that, in my opinion, that is telling kids that they cannot take care of themselves at that age already. So yeah, getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's really fine. Gets down to it is, I really just want to find ways to enable parents, which is going to help us to enable kids to take care of their health.
I remember when I was growing up, I used to get in trouble for not coming home, because I was raised in a very strict household. I had to get my homework done and I had to get the chores done, but then I would disappear. And I remember my mother used to scream, time to come home for dinner. And I'm like, we're playing football, we're playing softball, we're riding bikes, we're playing things you can't play anymore, like Cops and Robbers and Cowboys and Indians. We used to play those games. And we were outside all the time. 4 seasons. I was born and raised in a suburb of Rochester, New York. I was always outside, ice hockey and all this other stuff. Now, kids are like, I want to play Xbox or I want to play PlayStation. That's not going to help you. You need to go outside. The fresh air is going to help you. The exposure to the sun is going to help you. Moving around is going to help you, because you don't want to have these issues. The best time to take care of these issues, and I know you agree with me, Chris, is when you're young and develop those habits, instead of waiting till you're 60 and go, oh man, I've not taken care of my health for 60 years. I guess I should start now. It's good to start now, but you should have started when you were in childhood.
Yeah, and there's a habits component. There's a belief, and even on the mental health side of it, you think about How many young people now are struggling with anxiety and all kinds of things that are taking and stealing away their self-belief that they're capable of taking care of themselves and having the tools to be able to do that. There's a lot that plays in there on the development side as well. If you're not developing bone density and muscle mass in our early ages, by the time we get to be 30, it becomes a little bit more of an uphill climb. You can certainly create a lot of momentum with lifestyle changes, but if you can get out in front of it when we're much younger and create those sustainable habits and that sustainable health, then we really give ourselves that buffer to be successful as we get into our later decades, as opposed to having to figure it all out all over again or start from scratch when we're 40 and diagnosed with diabetes, and now we've got to figure out, I don't even know where to start here. It becomes, again, that feeling of dependency and lack of self-belief, and you're like, I guess the only option I have now is to start taking injections for the rest of my life here. And you don't know where to start. And as a result, you just take that other option that's being presented to you as the only option you think is practical for you to be able to get a result and to stay, I can't even say healthy, but to stay alive and to continue to function.
Yeah, keeping your head in the sand, being ignorant about it is not going to make the problems go away. So a little background on me. My wife and I haven't had health insurance since 2015. And the magic thing is when you start doing your research, you're like, wow, if I do this, if I stay active, if I eat the right foods, if I get enough sleep, you very rarely get sick. The only major incident we had was when my wife fell at home and broke her arm back in 2017. But people are like, I've got great health insurance and I'll just eat whatever. And now I am not a perfect eater. Like 2 hours before we recorded this episode, I had a small pizza from Domino's. Okay. Now it's not great, but I also ate good before that. I'll have a good high protein meal for dinner. And I do that about 2 or 3 times a week. I go out to have something that's total garbage. It's never my dinner, by the way. It's always my lunch. It's not breakfast. It's not dinner. It's lunch, because I want my body to have, remember, I go to bed at 8:30. I have lunch at 12, so I give my body about 7.5, 8 hours to digest all that food. Now, is that the perfect diet? Is that going to be Chris approved? Of course not. But I like to have some sweets now and then. I do monitor my blood glucose every day. I do weigh myself. I take my blood pressure every day. So I know where my numbers are. But I would argue, Chris, I think most people don't know what their numbers are. And the good news is, blood glucose, your weight, and your blood pressure, you could do those from home. You don't need to go to your doctor for that.
Yeah, and most people don't realize they can get a full blood panel from their home. There are companies out there right now that literally order at-home kits that show up at your door. And you take a finger prick while you're at the house and you drop a few drops on this thing and you mail it back in, and it can give you everything from testosterone levels to cortisol levels. That's what we push a lot of our clients to get. They're pretty affordable too. By the time if you have a copay with your insurance, or if you don't have insurance, you're going to end up probably also going to wait a month to be able to get into the doctor in the first place. And they're going to want you to come back to go over your levels and all this stuff. And so it becomes a bit of a runaround just to get basic blood work. And so it's one of those things where we talked earlier on about just being able to be an advocate for your health. If you can understand those baseline numbers, and there's 10 or 12 that are probably, in my opinion, worth understanding, that are going to give you that big spectrum of, you talked about things like blood sugar and stress levels, inflammation. If you can get that foundation in place, then those are things you could really recheck every 6 months. For instance, we got guys that come to us and they're like, I want to lose 40 pounds. I'm going to start, we get a plan in place for them. They check it at the beginning of the program. They'll check it 4 or 5 months later, and they can get a clear, they've lost weight, they're stronger, they've got all these things that they recognize from the data that are getting better, but then they can see like internally everything else that's also improving, and it's lower cholesterol levels, better testosterone, decreased cortisol, like all of these things that are trending for them because of these lifestyle changes. And that's also very encouraging. That says, I'm seeing these other results, but I also know that internally I'm getting healthier and healthier. And that just continues to build momentum and encourages them to keep up with the lifestyle changes that they're trying to make. So I do really like the idea of having a consistent biomarker panel that's taken. And again, there's tons of companies now that are doing that. You can do it from your own home for under a couple $100 that you can get a full panel done, that you don't have to leave your home, take that blood thing. And typically it's 4 or 5 days, you'll get your results.
Wow. I did not know that, because I hate needles. When I go to get blood drawn, I get lightheaded. I don't like the needle. I can prick my fingers for the blood glucose. So if you're telling me that they can get that off of this, I'm board for that. If I have to go someplace and draw blood, I just don't like the needle, because to me, it's like the size of a baseball bat. That's what my mind is blowing it up at. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I'm definitely going to talk to you about that off air to see if you have anybody recommended. And people who are listening to this or watching this, you can go Google or you could hit Chris up on X. So a couple other questions for you. Sunlight. Now, a lot of people, I get this argument with a lot of my friends who are not in the health space like you are. And they're like, well, if you go out and get sun, you got to wear sunscreen. I'm like, that defeats the purpose of being out in the sun, because if you're wearing sunblock, it's blocking the sun rays. Now, I don't go out there for 3 hours and get all toasty red like a lobster. I go out there for maybe, it depends on what time of year. Like here in Houston, June, July, and August, I go out there for about 25 minutes. That's all I need to be out there for, because there's no clouds, tons of sun. The sun's 30 degrees over our house. During the wintertime in Houston, I may have to go out there for an hour. But vitamin D from the sun is so powerful, is it not?
Yeah, I always call it hormone D, because it's actually closer to a hormone than it is a vitamin. It's basically a precursor for a number of things, including testosterone. If without quality vitamin D, getting testosterone levels up are going to be very challenging. So that's one of those low-hanging fruits, in addition to dropping body fat, increasing strength training, to be able to create increased testosterone levels without having to be dependent on synthetic testosterone injections and things like that. You need vitamin D to be able to do that. So yeah, I think in general, what we typically recommend goes back to what I was talking about earlier as well, is that if you're worried about sun exposure, you're worried about getting burned, your chances of getting burned in the early morning and in the evening hours is very minimal, because again, it actually has more of those anti-inflammatory rays as opposed to the inflammatory. So this sounds crazy, but if you were to get sunburn in the afternoon, one of the best things you could do would be to go out in the evening as the sun's going down and get sun on your skin, because that actually has an anti-inflammatory effect to you. So it seems strange, but again, it's one of those things where you can actually create a bit of a skin callus, so to speak, where if you're getting out there in the morning and the evening, you're going to basically teach your skin how to be able to handle even some more of those intense times. It's never okay to go out and just get burned and get crushed by the sun. I'm never going to encourage that. And that's why for most people, the morning and the evening sun is the best time. Then if you are going to be out there in the middle of the day, having skin cover, using things that are more like mineral-based sunscreens would be my recommendation if you're going to do it. You avoid a lot of the cancer-causing stuff that's in the majority of the mainstream sunscreens, and that's a whole other topic altogether. But I'm not against sunscreens altogether. I'm against the toxic ones that are going to be very inflammatory and cancer causing. Like there's links to cancer from things like benzene. So being able to avoid those and sticking with more of the mineral based ones. But yeah, if you are very susceptible, lighter skin complexion, things like that, that's where I try to prioritize those morning and evening rays, where you're going to get the most effect. You're still going to be able to absorb that vitamin D without exposing yourself to the more intense rays in the middle of the day.
Interesting. And I read something, maybe it was Peter Attia's book and some other places, that they're now connecting high consumption of glucose with cancer. Because apparently in the lab, cancer loves sweets. And that's why they're saying that you probably should, right now, if you are listening or watching this podcast, you need to reduce your sugar intake like immediately, because cancer loves the sweet stuff. Unless you don't want to live a long life. I want to live to at least 110. So if you want to live a long life, maybe cut back on the sugar. If you don't care when you die, then whatever. But before I give you the final question, do you have any thoughts on the whole cancer and glucose and how cancer loves sugar or glucose?
Yeah, and I think you can expand even beyond cancer. We talk about insulin resistance, which for those of you that are a little bit less familiar with it, is you could have stable blood sugars, and that might go on for years, where you go to the doctor, he says, oh, your fasting blood sugar looks good. But the entire time, it's taking more and more insulin to be able to keep your blood sugar stable. So you're developing a bit of an insulin resistance. It's really limiting insulin from being able to help pull sugar into your cells. So as that insulin resistance builds, you're going to basically create more inflammation. And like you said, high levels of glucose, high levels of sugar are going to have that effect. And that's really the standard American diet. Is it's very high processed carbohydrates that our body can process very quickly. We get that big blood sugar spike, we get that insulin push, and that happens over and over again. So you may not be diagnosed with prediabetes, you may not be a diabetic, but there's a large percentage of people that have some levels of insulin resistance going on. And that becomes a bit of a precursor to the things you talked about. It could be heart disease, it could be cancer. It's not just diabetes that is linked to high blood sugar. There's really a cascade of events when it comes to having that high blood sugar or having that insulin resistance. It's an inflammation fire, basically, that just keeps getting fueled. And as that inflammation keeps getting fueled, you can imagine what the cancer cell would love that stuff. When it's exposed to that, it just continues to have everything it needs to continue to feed. And one more angle of that is that's where there's definitely research out there that supports the idea of fasting, decreasing glucose levels while going through cancer treatments. Maybe you're doing more of a 1 meal a day approach when you've been diagnosed with cancer, where it basically chokes off some of that energy for the cancer to be able to continue to itself. So yeah, there's a lot of different theories and methods out there. And I'll be honest, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on cancer treatment or anything like that, but there is a lot of stuff out there now supporting kind of the reduction of sugar and keeping blood sugar stable, and how that can have a very positive effect on reducing risk of cancer.
Interesting. I could tell you that there's a gentleman in the Bible named Methuselah, and he lived 969 years, and he didn't have sugar other than figs. So just not saying if you get rid of sugar, you're going to live 969 years. That would be a weird conversation to tell your kids. Hey, when I was 700 years old. Anyways, before I ask you where people can go find out more about you, any parting wisdom that you want, because most people will listen to the whole show, but what you say, the last few things you say are what's going to stick with them. So what is that parting information you want to leave the listener or viewer today?
It's your responsibility for your health, and it's impacting much more than yourself. You think about, I saw so many clients over the years who were diagnosed with some kind of, it could be diabetes, or they had some kind of major issue, and how it impacted their family, how it impacted their kids. So there's a lot of people out there that are really working hard, trying to provide for their families, trying to take care of all these other responsibilities. But ultimately, if we don't take care of ourselves, we're really not taking care of those things the way that we need to be doing. And understanding that you're worth that investment, you're worth that time and energy to pour into yourself. It's not a selfish act for you to take care of yourself. I'd say it's actually a very selfless act because of what it allows you to do to those around you. You may not necessarily want to do it for yourself, but ultimately do it for those around you that you care about, that you love, and that you want to be able to be at your best for as long as possible. Maybe that's for you 110 years old like Mark, but really just being able to take advantage of the years that you have ahead of you. And so ultimately joy and peace and all those things come from taking care of ourselves, because it opens up the door to our spiritual health, our mental health, and all of these things that I think serve a much greater purpose than just being healthy. And that's one of those areas that I try to talk about a lot. Is health is just a door. It's not something we should be stressing about and be OCD about everything we eat, everything we drink. There's opportunities for us to be able to enjoy life and still be really healthy and be able to be at our best at the same time. Yeah, just being able to take that initial step, believe in yourself, build that momentum, and find a way to do it sustainably at the same time, because there's a lot of frustration that gets built out when you do something for 75 hard or 90 days and you get some great results, but you're like, that sucked. Like, I don't want to do that the rest of my life. And you're going to find that you end up falling back into those old habits again. And that just, instead of building self-belief, it shows you that the only way I can get results is by like gritting my teeth through something. Then that feels insurmountable as well. So being able to take it one small step at a time, build that sustainability into your life, and just continue to stack bricks as you build that momentum.
Wow. Tons of information. This is going to be something that people either listen to or watch more than once, because you gave us a lot to think about. So where can people go to find out more about what you're doing and the mission you're serving this world in?
Yeah, my brother and I, we put out a newsletter a couple times a week. We feel really strongly about it. You can find it on our website. The website is brother2brotheryou.com. That's where we have a lot of our information about our online coaching as well. If you're looking for some one-on-one help, we'd love to be able to have a conversation, talk about your goals. But really, if you're just looking to get to know us a little bit better, I think our newsletter, I'm generally a pretty humble guy, but I do believe our newsletter is one of the most actionable and practical health newsletters out there. We put a ton of value and a ton of energy into that every single week. And you can access that through our website as well. We're going to be putting some blog posts up there as well that'll have a lot of our previous articles available to check out and just to get to know us a little bit better. And then, on Twitter, that's where Brett and I are the most active. So I'm at Chris Boettcher 9 and try to put out some quality information on there, try to give as much free value as we can, and just really trying to spread the message that health isn't something that requires 5, 6, 10 hours a week to be healthy. But really, at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. And there are a lot of forces out there that I think are working against the average person. And being aware of those things and using that to fuel you to take action and say, I'm not going to be a number, I'm not going to be a statistic because somebody wants to make money off of me and my family. And just being able to take some responsibility for that and lead from the front, and you'll be amazed at the ripple effect that it can have, not just in your life, what you're able to do with family and friends. And people get curious because it starts to look different. The things you're doing look different. And I can tell you that people are hungry for something different right now. There's a lot of unhappiness out there. And if you provide something that you show that there's energy and there's joy and you're just out there enjoying life and making progress, you're going to draw people to you. And that's one of the things that you can't really put a value on what that does for you and for those around you.
Wow. Amazing. Even though he said the T word, it's X, Chris. It's not Twitter anymore. I know it's a hard habit to break.
It is.
I'm one of these people. I'm one of these nerds. I just switch right away because I'm a dork like that. But anyway, I really appreciate being here. Folks, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. MrProductivity.com, M-I-S-T-E-R, MrProductivity.com. Where to go to find out all about me and sign up for my newsletter, which I think is pretty entertaining. Maybe not as much as Chris's, but I think it's pretty entertaining. MrProductivity.com. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Mark, it's been a pleasure, man, and I really appreciate the invite and look forward to doing this again sometime here soon.